All right, everybody. Thank you so much for attending our first LinkedIn Live event. We really do appreciate um, your time here today, and we'll try to make this as informative and maybe a little entertaining as possible. We really do want to make this interactive. So if you have any questions, please submit them on the chat, and we'll make sure that we respond to you, or hopefully try to respond to your questions. If you have any issues with connections or hearing, you can just put those comments in there as well, and Marissa will get right back to you. My name is Craig Guarente. I'm the CEO and founder of Palisade Compliance, and I do a lot of writing and videos and talking and helping customers around their Oracle licensing. And one of the things that keeps coming up in many of our engagements is Oracle's use of their legal department and to put some pressure or incentives in front of customers to do things that Oracle wants them to do, or to stop doing things that Oracle thinks they shouldn't be doing. And I thought that would be a great topic. We've got half a year left for Oracle's fiscal year. We just finished their Q2 in November the other day. So now we've got 6 months left, and this is the time where Oracle really exerts pressure. So I thought it would be a great idea to be joined today by Pam Fulmer. She is the founding partner of the Tactical Law Group and is involved with helping companies with a lot of different vendors, including Oracle. So welcome, Pam, to the show today.
Thanks, Craig. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. Now, this is our second podcast together. We did one before, which I think was a little more general, but I do appreciate you coming back and having this talk with us. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself, your background, and sort of how you got to be this sort of Oracle defense attorney?
Sure. Yeah. For companies that are adverse to Oracle. So I have been practicing law in the Bay Area for about 30 years now. And I started out at a medium-sized firm in San Francisco called the Howard Rice Firm. And that firm now is the San Francisco office of Arnold and Porter. And after about 14 years, I actually left that firm and went to a couple of other more global firms, Jones Day, DLA Piper, Dentons, Arent Fox, some of the biggies. And during my time at those firms, I did do a lot of IP and a lot of IP-related work. And I started getting more and more into software audit defense as software audit publishers started ramping up their audits and kind of, employing some really brass knuckle tactics. More and more clients were seeking legal advice, and working at a bigger firm. Oftentimes, it actually became hard to take on all of these clients. A lot of people at the firms might want to, not be adverse to Oracle or other big publishers. And obviously that would create conflict situations. So I thought, as the work kept growing, that it made sense to actually just hang out my own shingle, start my own firm. And so I did that. And so this is one, it's a major part of our practice, but it is one part of our practice. And we basically would, we're adverse to Oracle. We would never represent Oracle. And we also, do other software audits. We've done a number of Quest software audits and Micro Focus and those type of publishers. So if you're dealing with an aggressive software publisher, we're a really good boutique law firm to come to for, I think really helpful, timely, and, practical advice.
I would agree with that last statement. Yes, highly recommend you guys for software audit defense. We focus on Oracle and their customers, and you're seeing a broader array of audits from different vendors. What makes Oracle unique with their audits? Like, how do they do things differently than other vendors? What should people sort of know about that?
So not all the vendors are as aggressive as Oracle is. Oracle is pretty aggressive. And there are other ones. Quest is aggressive. Micro Focus is aggressive. But Oracle has been doing this for a really long time. They have a very developed playbook, which we see them deploy in all of these audits. And even the most sophisticated companies that are being audited by Oracle can end up making bad decisions and paying way too much money in order to get out from under an audit. And I think that part of what Oracle has done is, even though Oracle actually doesn't sue their customers all that often, I think in the market there's an impression that they really do, because Oracle's been engaged in all of this other litigation with, for example, Rimini Street, which is a competing maintenance and support provider. And Oracle has been going after them really hardcore since 2010. So I think in the marketplace, there is this feeling that, Oracle is very litigious, and that if you don't buckle down and get in line and do what they want you to do, you're going to end up with some major lawsuit on your hands. And it's my opinion that Oracle, purposely basically puts that out in the marketplace so that people capitulate and give in to these unreasonable demands and not stand up. And what we try to do is help clients, stand on the contract. And if you've overused or over deployed the software, pay what's fair, get out from under the audit, but don't pay these, phenomenal monetary demands that we see them often making.
Yeah, there's definitely a perception of Oracle and then a reality. And I don't think Oracle does anything to dispel that perception, right? Even in some of their,
That's right.
we read through the court cases and the filings and things that people claim Oracle does, like the audit bargain close, right? We're going to audit you until you do what we want and buy some cloud or do whatever. Even in Oracle's response to that, they're like, hey, there's nothing that prevents us from being tough with our customers and having hard-nosed tactics with sales. There's nothing illegal about it, but it's totally fair, right? And it's kind of an interesting way, especially as you're trying to move into the cloud business, where you really need to be trusted by your customers, right? Because once you're in a cloud, have all your data, right? All that vendor needs to do is flip a switch and you're screwed, right? So, and that there needs to be a much more trusting relationship. And again, we see customers who have problems with Oracle. That's what I try to tell folks all the time. Listen, I'm giving you my view of the world. We don't get the customer who's happy with Oracle. It's, I'm being treated really fairly. How can I give them more money? Make this even better. We get the customer who's under audit or has a ULA or wants to spend less with Oracle or is thinking about third-party support or something like that. So it's kind of interesting to see that perception. And we had a call yesterday with a client in Sweden. And they're like, Craig, there's no, I want you to show me the court cases where people have sued Oracle because of this crazy VMware stuff that they try to pull. And I had to tell them, there are no court cases. Oracle's not going to try to defend that. It's my opinion. Oracle's not going to try to defend that in court. Could you imagine an attorney saying, Your Honor, forget the contract. There's this policy that says it's not part of the contract. It's for educational purposes only, and that's what applies here. And it's our internal interpretation of that policy that applies. It's just not going to happen, right? So I think, yes, I think this confusion and doubt and fear is sort of by design, right? It's not an accident. It's a feature, not a bug of what Oracle does. And they do it really well. I mean, they generate so much money by customers just saying, I want Oracle to go away.
That's so true. Absolutely true, Craig. I mean, what we see is sometimes, and Oracle will do this. They'll say, if you don't basically buy more software, we're going to audit you. And I have to talk to customers and say, hey, I wouldn't do that. Okay. I mean, if you're an easy pickings for Oracle, they're just going to come back more often, so what you need to do is you need to, figure out your compliance position and try to stay compliant and, be ready for the audit when it comes, and then push back hard against bogus assertions. And And, don't be cowed by Oracle. It's surprising how many companies really are. And
Mhm.
it's a sad thing. And when I get brought in, the great times are like before the audit notice or right as the audit notice comes out, because then we can work with experts such as yourself, Craig, and, have a whole strategy around how we're going to respond. But oftentimes I don't get brought in until the breach notice has been sent or the termination letter is out there. And, my first session with these clients oftentimes is almost like a counseling session. They're just,
Yes.
you know what I mean, right, Craig? So they're just so blown away. And they say to me, how can Oracle do this? We're their business partner, we're their customer. And I'm like, yeah, this is what people are saying all over the globe about Oracle. But they're shameless about this. And then after you've been beaten up, abused, scared to death, then Oracle sales, who actually is probably the one that may even have instigated the audit in the first place, comes back like, they're the savior and they're ready to, get back to business. And boy, we're sorry about that audit. And so, but that's their business model. And so you got to be ready for it. And the best thing to do is prepare for that.
I love the like a therapy session because, when back in the day when we used to do trade shows and used to have booths and be able to meet people in person, um, we always thought, what are we going to have in our booth this year? And I was like, we should have a big red couch with a chair next to it. And then people could just come in and lie down and tell me what Oracle did to you. Let's have a conversation. And it's sort of a joke, but it was the
Mhm.
truth. You would get these, and I think there's that frustration. Like, you know, on the one hand, these customers many of them love the Oracle products. They are integral to how they do business, and they sort of they couldn't survive without them now. But on the other hand, it's wow, it's really tough to deal with this person or that person. And when I'm trying to advise customers about Oracle's behavior, I try to put myself back in the Oracle world, right? I try to put myself. So I was there for 16 years, right? So I ran the audit group, ran the contracts group, the sales support group. So know the playbook, know. And I said, if I'm the Oracle salesperson, what would I do in this situation, right? I have this big quota, and this customer's not talking to me, and I kind of suspect they're out of compliance, and I've got 4 months to close business. Okay, I might not have this account in June, so send the audit letter. Why not? Let's see what happens. And I think that's a lot, like you mentioned, maybe the sales reps instigated it. I don't think anything happens at Oracle without someone in sales saying okay. And whether that's true or not in any particular case, always advise the client to think that happened, like to work with Oracle as if the salesperson on the other side is the one who sicked the LMS, SIA glass team on you, because you need leverage over them, right? You need to make sure that because they're going to be talking to you about this thing, and then the auditors are going to be talking to your DBAs, and they sort of are really good about surrounding the customers and extracting data. And the other day, you and I were talking about this. The I look at the audits as it's like an iceberg, right? That what you see is above the water surface. That is the official audit letter, right? But there's
Right,
so
right.
much underneath, right? You're calling in for maintenance, and Oracle's tracking what you're doing. Now with Java, you're downloading things and installing them, and it's sending data back to Oracle. Oracle's put their audit team in every ULA certification, right? So this risk of audit is just not what you see. It's 80% of it is below the surface. Even just, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. A salesperson or an auditor going to a customer and saying, listen, if you don't do this, I have to send it to my legal department, right? And so it might not even go to the legal department, but just the threat of that often is enough to get customers moving.
That's right. And again, this is my opinion that that Oracle absolutely does that, and that they use their legal department strategically to try to threaten their customers. And oftentimes, I don't think the legal department even knows, but But, the sales guys will say, well, if you don't buy this software, then, I'm going to have to escalate this to Oracle Legal. And like, that's some terrible thing. And I can tell you, I counsel my clients, don't be afraid to escalate to Oracle Legal. Because frankly, Oracle Legal can be much more reasonable than the sales guys and gals who, are trying to make that quota. And, my understanding is a pretty brutal sales environment over there, and people are trying to make a living. And so, they're really aggressive. Whereas, if you go to the Oracle legal department, these are very smart lawyers from top law firms. Oftentimes, Oracle will hire associates from law firms that they do a lot of work with. And these are good lawyers who understand risk. And their job is to advise the Oracle business. And when Oracle business gets a little too aggressive or, a little too out there, then the lawyers will basically kind of pull them back, and that's their job. And I've spent so many years at the big law firms, and I like dealing with lawyers, and I approach these things as if I'm a problem solver, and so is the Oracle lawyer. And together we're going to try to solve this problem. And if we have to litigate, we would do that. But ultimately, that's not the focus. It's trying to solve the problem. And I think I've been very successful at doing that.
Yeah, the idea of pre-escalating, let's call it, right? So preemptively bringing something to legal, that's something that can be very effective for customers, right? If you think that, honestly, if you think the sales rep is being unreasonable and they're being nuts and they're acting in a way that you find not appropriate, and they say, hey, we're going to bring it to legal. Great. What's the name? I'll call them right now. Let's get them on the phone. Let's talk through this. And again, trying to put myself in the attorney's, I'll take the call. You can put me on speaker. I'm going to back up the sales rep. But as soon as I hang up that phone, I'm going to call that person and be like, I can't defend this. This is ridiculous. You need to fix this, right? So that can be a strategy. Obviously, we don't. It's not a comfortable strategy for customers to. What, you want me to call a legal person? Have my attorney call them? Like, you diffuse this. So what do you think are the biggest mistakes that companies make that get them embroiled into litigation with Oracle? Have you seen any patterns?
Well, I think that sometimes, I think that sometimes people really believe that, that Oracle's about ready to really terminate the license, because Oracle, will. And like, say, for example, Mars, which, Craig, I know you know about that lawsuit, brought a declaratory relief action against Oracle because Oracle's legal department was threatening to terminate the license. And they did kind of the right thing. They went into court and they said, we don't think that, what you're telling us about our obligations to license all these VMware servers is correct. And, we don't believe we're in breach of the contract, and we don't believe you can terminate the contract. And we're going to go talk to a judge about this. And, so in that case, I think that Oracle really overplayed their hand. And it's my opinion from dealing with Oracle that the last thing they actually really want to do is file a lawsuit against an audit client, especially if they've raised VMware. And, what I'm seeing from the cases is it's, besides the Mars case, which was brought by the customer, we're not seeing Oracle litigating, VMware. And so if you are in an audit situation and Oracle is making some huge monetary demand based on VMware, call me because call Greg. But that's not an amount of money that you should be paying. And so I think that we could really help out with that. So some customers, they take the position that, we're just going to pay this because we want to get out from under the audit. And then other customers will say, no, we have to really protect ourselves like Mars did. And then in terms of the situation with some of the other lawsuits that I do see Oracle filing, and I actually did a little survey and looked for lawsuits where since 2015 where Oracle has asserted copyright claims, and there's only 4 of them. And I've actually defended the companies in 2 of those cases, and I actually am defending one right now. And so that's a topic that, as I mentioned to you, Craig, because that's pending litigation, I can't talk about that particular case. But what we're seeing is that Oracle is bringing lawsuits that they think they're going to win against customers that don't, where allegations of VMware may not be involved. And what tends to happen is there's a kind of a breakdown in discussions with Oracle. And I think that the best thing to do is actually keep the conversation going with Oracle and try to work through, and get the thing resolved. And what I see sometimes is, and I just go crazy because Oracle with their playbook, they basically, they're always sending, emails to the IT folks during an audit saying, you're supposed to get us this. It's been 2 weeks. We haven't gotten it. And then oftentimes what you see, and this is the complete wrong thing to do, is that it's like the IT folks start hiding from Oracle and they don't get back to Oracle. And that creates a horrible record. And so, you need to stay in the game with Oracle and not just run, and you need to actually be reasonable and create your own record that you are complying with the audit, but that you're not going to pay 1 dime more than what you owe. I don't know if you see that as well, Craig, that, when they just go into hiding, and it's the complete wrong thing to do.
Yeah, that's when, this is no disrespect to Oracle, but this is what I tell folks is that's when Oracle does stupid things, like issue breach notices and lawsuits and things like that, when customers are completely non-responsive. You signed a contract with Oracle. They have a right to audit you. You are using their IP, right? You do need to adhere to the contract, right? If it says they notify you and you have to respond in 45 days, take all your 45 days, get your plan together, and then respond. So, we are so committed to customers being in compliance. We actually put it in our name, right? We used to be called Palisade Consulting. I remember this 10 years ago. And Oracle came to me and said, you can't talk to people about compliance. Only we could talk about compliance. We are the deciders of compliance. And I was like, okay, we're changing our name to Palisade Compliance. I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's so not true. So we do see, when I think about mistakes customers make, it's like you said, they don't respond, right? And sometimes, and we're involved with one now where Oracle sends the audit letter to someone and they quit and it just sits there, right? And then, so there's or they send it to the wrong person, or I've seen where Oracle sends it to people on the board of directors, right? They just, forget about escalating. They go right to the top with these things. So you never know so not responding is definitely a mistake. Responding too quickly or with too much information is sort of the other side of that coin. Just Oracle says you have to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. What's in your contract, right? That's ultimately I say that 100 times a week. What's in the contract? Let's read that. What does it say? So I think that is, obviously there are things that they, actually using stuff they're not licensed for, or using too much of it, or the wrong people using it, those types of things. Oracle audits are not accidental, right? There isn't a list and they pull out, oh, congratulations, you won a license review. Oracle is auditing you because for 2 reasons. Number 1, they think you're out of compliance, and number 2, they think they can get money from you. And that's it. And then obviously they're going to protect their IP as part of both of those. So they have to monetize their IP. So I get it. So I agree. I think non-responsiveness is the first mistake. And then the second mistake is too responsive, not having a plan and just, doing what Oracle says.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the contract, basically the Oracle contracts say that the audit can't unreasonably interfere with your normal business operations. And so you need to hold that close to you and be thinking about that, while you're being audited. So they can ask for relevant information, but they can't ask for a bunch of information that's not relevant to your use of the Oracle software. And when they start demanding information that they're not entitled to and issuing breach notices and threatening license termination if you don't provide the information, then that's really starting to unreasonably interfere with your normal business operations. And I think that good arguments can be made that if they're asking you or demanding that you pay a bunch of money, involving VMware, for example, to get out from under an audit, and then suddenly you're not as robustly using your VMware software because you're worried about Oracle, that's kind of an intentional interference with your contract with VMware. And, I think could be actionable in certain circumstances. So, you really do need to stand your ground. And I think that that's a really important thing, and not to be cowed. Stand your ground and stand on the contract, because the contract is actually pretty strong for you.
Contract, and I think this Oracle attorneys would agree with this, the contract is king or queen, depending on
Yeah.
so, so Pam, we could have this conversation for hours about Oracle, and I do have a couple more questions, but before I do that, I do want to get to some of the comments that people have had, and I think you created a little firestorm here, because one of your first comments was about Oracle's litigious nature, specifically with Rimini Street. And just to give everyone on the phone some background, we have lots of customers who use Rimini Street, and we met those guys. I remember I had just left Oracle, and a reporter asked me for a quote on third-party support, and I didn't know anything about it at the time because I had come from Oracle. So I was like, bad. So I gave this quote, and then the president of Rimini Street called me up and literally started yelling at me about all the things I said that was wrong. I had no idea who this person was. I was like, who are you? And he educated me on sort of what they're doing and how they do it. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, because the number one complaint we get from customers is my Oracle support costs are too high. Like literally 10 years later, it's the number one complaint that we get all the time. Every single customer comes to us, says, help me reduce it. And one of the ways we do that is by referring them to Rimini Street, right? And they've taken over a few of our accounts to help with that. But I know that the litigation is ongoing, right? And in the one respect, if I'm Rimini Street, hey, this really sucks because Oracle keeps suing me. In another respect, I'm like, it's keeping out competition while people sort of figure out what's going on. But it seems to me the company's thriving, and we get every single engagement we have, the issue comes up with third-party support. So what do you think about all the litigation that's going on around, specifically with Rimini and Oracle and maybe other third-party vendors?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's been going on for 11 years now, and there are actually two lawsuits right now. One is what's called Rimini 1, which is the lawsuit that Oracle filed against them. And now Oracle has contended that Rimini Street has violated the injunction, and they've asked the court, and the court has issued an order to show cause why Rimini shouldn't be in contempt. That was litigated, and there's been no decision on it yet. But I think the hearings were in September, very extensive hearings and everything. And so we'll see. Oracle's being uber aggressive, and I think. And again, I don't know how the judge is going to rule, but Oracle's being so aggressive that they're acting like if Rimini's, engineers learned how to provide support because they've done it several times, that's somehow a copyright infringement. and I think, and they're trying to preclude, basically them from using, their own experience to provide, a really important thing, which is a more reasonably priced maintenance and support provider. So that's Remedy 1. So we'll see what happens with that. Remedy 2 was actually brought by Remedy because they said, okay, maybe there were some issues with the first way that we were servicing our customers, but we've completely changed that. And now we have version 2.0. And so we want you to say that this is complies with the law and that we're not doing anything wrong here. And that one is being litigated as well. And basically, the court has not issued an order yet setting a trial date. The court basically said that they think, maybe mid next year, 2022, but there's a bunch of criminal trials that need to go first. But they're actively litigating that, and they just did, they put together a proposed position statement basically from each side. And I'm kind of cheering for Remedy Street and hoping that, that they win this and that they can get Oracle to back off a little bit, because some of the things that, I've seen and just reading the pleadings, Oracle's been very threatening of certain customers, and they've sent out missives and all this stuff trying to stop these companies from going with Remedy Street. And so, to me, that's unfair. I mean, so, and I do know that a lot of customers are saying Oracle support is really expensive, and it's an unreasonable amount of money, and we're trying to save money. We're all in a tough situation now with the pandemic and everything. And so anyway, we'll see how it goes, but some really interesting stuff, and I'm cheering for Remedy Street here.
Me too. And just to put sort of a perspective on sort of the Oracle side in terms of dollars, it's been 3 or 4 years since Oracle reported earnings in a way that you could split out license and cloud and consulting and support, right? I think when their cloud business took a little bit of a hit, they combined all the earnings. And I don't know what licensed software cloud revenue is, but they now report on it. And it's really impossible to break it up. But the last time they reported earnings, it was almost $20 billion in annual revenue for their support at 95% margin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And what I've heard from the technical folks is that in reality, Oracle oftentimes will buy these new companies and they're not innovating anymore. Okay. But they're charging all this for support, and that, it's just getting to be a completely unreasonable amount. 22% is a lot of money, and so I think that there are good providers out there. And I think Remedy Street is approaching this and trying to, really comply with the injunction. And so we'll see what the judge says. But I definitely think that, it's I've had to counsel clients that have been threatened by Oracle, and I think that's bad news. I think that Oracle's contracts allow you to go to third-party support providers, and I think it's abusive for Oracle to pull some of these tactics and try to prevent it.
All right. And just one more note on support. The 22% you mentioned is the first year, right? So if Oracle tacks on a 3 or 4% increase, you bought these licenses 20 years ago, you could be paying 30, 35, 40% of what you originally paid for the licenses, right? It's a gift that keeps on giving to Oracle. Okay, so I think we hit support. Here's a loaded question, and I say that because
I would just say one more thing, if I could, Craig, about this. So one thing that's kind of in the Remedy Street case that in Remedy 2 that's still being litigated is that basically there's a cloud issue, and I don't know how it might affect other in other contexts, but basically Oracle's taking the position that that if customers are going to the cloud, and if Remedy Street is providing maintenance and support in the cloud, that violates the facilities restriction of the license agreement. And Remedy is saying, no, it's not. You don't. Oracle itself has urged people to go to the cloud, and everybody's going to the cloud, right? And so, so as long as the customer has control over what happens in the cloud with the software, the facilities restriction isn't violated. And so that issue, the court has said that issue has not been decided, and that will be in remedy too. But I can see if the court, would decide that somehow that is a violation of the facilities restriction to have gone to the cloud, that can also have repercussions for other software publishers. So you might see a whole nother set of audits coming out where basically, if you're in the cloud, they're claiming there's a violation of a facilities restriction. So that's an interesting one that we're watching. And again, we're rooting for Remedy Street.
So, keep your questions coming here if there's other things you want to know. Let's segue into cloud for a second. I'd like your thoughts on this because we're seeing this all the time. It's cloud related, it's virtualization related, it's support related. Everybody's moving to the cloud, right? So in one fashion or another, they're taking part or all of their estates, usually a hybrid cloud. They'll have some stuff on premise. They'll have multi-clouds. So we work with a lot of customers who they want to go to Google, they want to go to AWS, Microsoft, IBM, wherever. And they come to me and say, Craig, I can't do it because my Oracle rep says I can't. What? Yes, they tell me I can't run in the cloud. I was like, well, let me see your contracts. We have all the NDAs in place. We read them. Like, there's nothing in here that you can't. Like, sometimes Oracle throws that in with ULAs and there's different provisions, but I don't know why they're telling you that other than they want you to buy Oracle Cloud. So some folks want us to give them, guarantees and to walk them through Oracle licensing and how they do it. And you're the owner of the contract. And, I can't make Oracle say certain things, but we have ways to get Oracle to admit that, yeah, you can run in Oracle Cloud. This is, I think, one of those areas where you were talking about escalating, right? So the sales rep says you can't. I said, great. Here's your Oracle attorney. Send them an email. Ask them if there's anything in your contract prohibiting going to Google Cloud, right? And it always works. So are you seeing that? Are you seeing customers worried or nervous, or how are they dealing with when they want to move to something that's not Oracle? And is Oracle using their legal department to push cloud?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And it sounds like you're seeing that too. And the thing is that you can't just always accept a statement from Oracle sales at face value. You have to push back on it. And so, and to do that, you really should consult people that actually handled this type of stuff, such as yourself, every day. And get that guidance. And I think that's really important. And so just don't completely trust them. Oracle does a great job of creating FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's how they make a lot of money. And so what you need to do, the Oracle customer, is you can't buy into the FUD. You need to get the facts. And then, you can talk and figure out if there is risk in something, what is the risk? But, that's something that you as a company need to decide. But yeah, you can go to the cloud, but, you just need to make sure that if you're going to the cloud, that you're in compliance, or else Oracle might come knocking on your door. And there was a case, I believe that was the Envisage case, where Oracle, there was a customer that went to AWS and did the license included model. And it turns out that Oracle discovered and alleged that they were doing hosting in violation of the terms of use for that type of license. And so you have to make sure that if you're using a certain type of license, that you're in compliance with it. And that particular company claimed that AWS had said that this was, a license that that was the perfect license for everything they were planning on doing. And so I don't know, the case settled real early. I don't know what ultimately happened there. But I would definitely, consult with somebody before you decide to go to the cloud. And I wouldn't be relying on the salespeople to tell you, what you should be doing there. So that's something to think about, and just be thoughtful, get advice, and be prepared.
So what, and we've got about, 15 or 20 minutes, but we're holding the audience, so people are interested in what we say. So we'll stay here for a few more minutes. If I'm an Oracle customer and I'm using their products and I just want to not get sued by Oracle, I want to not have the legal team put pressure on me, what do you recommend a customer do so they don't need you or I? I mean, basically.
Well, I actually think that they're better served to have you or I, because we do deal with this type of thing, all the time, and we've seen the playbook. But I think that companies that don't have experts, and this isn't me, the lawyer, but experts helping them stay in compliance, are making a huge mistake. They're being penny wise and pound foolish, and that they should hire experts well before the audit notice comes out, and get in there and make sure they're in compliance. And clients oftentimes really think that their IT folks are really on top of the requirements, and they know it all, but really they don't. And so I think it's important to get the expert help to keep yourself in a compliant position.
And I guess that sort of brings up one other question here on the chat box was, this was the loaded question. How much does a typical Oracle audit defense cost? Minimum and maximum. So I'm going to take the first crack at that, if you don't mind.
Okay, you go for it.
And I would just say, what's the cost of not getting help? That's how I would look at it, right? So whatever you're charging, whatever I'm charging, it's going to be this much of what you're going to pay to Oracle. At least that's, my thought on that. What do you think?
I totally agree. And, it literally, I save my clients millions and millions of dollars, and my fees are a tiny fraction of that. It really is a good investment. And I remember a couple of years ago, it was the strangest thing. I got an email from a guy who said, I heard how you're helping Oracle customers, and I'd like to create, a company with you where basically we get a percentage of what we save the client, and I'm sitting there thinking, why would I take a cold call from you? But in any event, the amount of money that we save clients is just it's just astronomical versus the amount of our fees. And don't be penny wise and pound foolish is what I would say.
We're seeing, so obviously we're not a law firm. We don't represent customers in that fashion, but we support law firms, right? When there's an issue and they need either sort of consulting help behind the scenes. And recently I've done some, testimony help where you can be an expert witness as well. A lot of the litigation I've seen is not directly with Oracle. It's interesting. There's an Oracle customer who hired an IT firm to run their IT. The customer gets audited, ends up paying a lot of money to Oracle, and then sues the IT firm and says, hey, you were supposed to make sure I was in compliance, right? And so there's a lot of back and forth around that. So it's interesting, or we've seen, an Oracle partner or a software vendor embed Oracle in their solution, and then one of their customers sued them because they're like, hey, you don't have the right license from Oracle. Now Oracle's coming after me. So this legal sort of overhang around using Oracle, it's not just with Oracle, but it also hits your vendors that you're using to run your Oracle and manage your IT or build your software. It's a big, heavy lift for customers. Like the Oracle, it seems like the Oracle sort of gotcha could hit you in multiple ways. I don't know if you're seeing that, or is your involvement just directly when Oracle's involved, let's say?
Mostly when Oracle's involved. It doesn't mean that that will always be the way, but it's somebody has gotten a call from Oracle or a threat to terminate a license or something like that, and so they need help. But we're seeing that Oracle, they seem to be like actively researching, and I'm kind of curious to ask you about this, Craig. It looks like someone, I don't know if it's the sales guys or if they have a new, group that looks at customers, but it's almost like they're looking at who is doing the RDS, AWS RDS license included model and getting those names, and then like going through their websites and looking for information about what they're up to. And, other lawsuits, it looks like that they're scouring, public filings and everything to find information about what the customer is doing. And so Oracle is not just, your typical audit. They seem to be actively looking and really conducting some detailed analysis as to what folks are doing. Are you seeing that too?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to give you two answers to that. I want to give you an example of a client we had a few years ago, and they're based in Manhattan here, and they announced, it was over the Christmas break, Christmas holiday. They announced a merger with another company in the week in between Christmas and New Year's. And I knew they were out, the business was closed. So that Monday, I think it was a Tuesday. I think the Tuesday was January 2nd. 9 o'clock in the morning, I called the CIO just to let him know, hey, you have this agreement with Oracle. You announced this big thing. We need to figure this out together, right? This is 9 a.m. on January 2nd. He just laughs. He said, Craig. I'm like, why are you laughing? Oracle's on the other line. They called 5 minutes before you. I was like, wow, that is great. Okay, here's what you're going to tell them. And then you're going to call me when you're done, right? So you're going to be quiet. You're going to listen to what they have to say, be very respectful until you, and we got them through that issue. So I think the bigger question is, how does Oracle get information to find folks out of compliance? And the answer is any way they can get it, right? Mm-hmm. So we've seen Oracle audit their partners. Think about that. These companies partner with Oracle, embed Oracle software in their solutions, sell it to their customers, and then give Oracle money back, right? Oracle has a team of people who look at that very closely. And obviously, if you're not giving money back, that's one thing. But they're going after, that has sort of been a good revenue stream for them, because it's some of the things Oracle does in their licensing makes it difficult for Oracle partners to know when they have to start paying Oracle for things. So we've seen that. We've seen public announcements like the example I gave, where customers were merging. We've seen Oracle use customers make announcements on new offerings that they have, right? We've seen, there was a website Oracle had a few years ago. We want to give you a TCO on moving to Oracle Cloud. This is like 6 years ago. The very first question was, are you using VMware? It was the first like, give me your name, your company name, and are you using VMware? And I was like, oh my God, I have no idea. That was after I left, so I have no idea where that information was going. But again, if I'm the Oracle rep and I have 100 accounts, I'm going to look at the first one and say, what do they do, right? How can I want to build that. I want to have a good relationship. I want to build it. That's how I'm going to lead with my sales effort. If that doesn't work, I'm going to go to sales effort 2, which is make them talk to me. Right. And then sales effort 3 is audit them and, get their money. So I think Oracle is really, really good and sophisticated and smart about how they target customers. Again, I don't think it's an accident when you get the letter.
No, I agree 100%. One other thing that I would say, and this is to the lawyers out there that may be listening, and there are some companies that they really don't know. I mean, these audit notices go to the IT folks, and oftentimes they don't bring it to the attention of the legal department. And so then what happens is that the legal department only becomes involved after the final audit report drops and Oracle's demanding multi-millions of dollars. And then the lawyer gets roped in. They haven't had a background with it. They don't know anything about it. And then, they start trying to figure out, who can I consult about this? When they call the usual suspects, all the big firms, a lot of those firms are conflicted out because they represent Oracle. And so I think that's how often, this boutique model that we have at Tactical Law can be really, really helpful for clients. But basically, you really need to kind of not capitulate, know the beast, know the Oracle beast, stand on your contract rights, and then control the flow of information, because Oracle is looking. They are actively looking.
You think our business is going to dry up when Oracle moves customers to the cloud, or you think folks are going to be a little more, Oracle's going to go after them a little bit more?
I think that this is, unfortunately, is going to be a line of work that, is going to stretch into the future. And again, it's not just Oracle. There are other very aggressive software companies, but, you really need to know your contract. You need to stand up for yourself and, be in compliance. But when, usually in all these audits, there are issues found, so it's not like if there are issues found that, that makes you a bad company or, whatever. But, try to hire folks such as yourself to stay into compliance, and then, don't be bullied by Oracle, and stand firm on your contract, because it is a good contract.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. It's really up to the client to take ownership of that, and sort of assert themselves in that relationship with Oracle, and not rely on Oracle to make statements that with the sales bluster, and then treat that as fact. We always recommend, I remember that movie years ago, Ghostbusters, right? When the phone call came in, the receptionist had the button and she hit it and all the alarms went off. I don't care who's auditing you. You should have that red button, right? If Micro Focus sends an audit, you should have an audit response team ready to go, that you hit that button and everybody knows, right? You have a plan in place. I mean, Oracle has a plan. They know how they want to audit you. Page 1, page 2, up to page 100. You should have the same thing, right? And that you can apply to multiple vendors. And I think that's what we've seen. Like you said, stay in compliance. Make sure you know what's in your contract. Don't be bullied. I think when you can do that, if Oracle or anybody comes to you and you have the information at your fingertips and you know your compliance position, the risk of being sued or threatened goes way down, right? It's customers who don't know. It's like the weak, right? The lion attacks the weak deer. Like that's who they're going to go for, right? Not the one in the middle of the pack who's doing everything right.
Yeah, I mean, and I tell my clients this: you really do want to be the squeaky wheel, because Oracle, they want to make the most money that they can make, and so make it difficult for them to to pull it out of you, so that they go pick on someone else. And but you're only a target if you basically kind of just roll over. And a lot of times people roll over. I mean, we didn't go into it in too much depth, but there's that whole Sunrise Firefighters case, that securities class action that is pending in the Northern District of California, and there are multiple assertions in there about Oracle's ABC audit tactics, their predatory tactics, and how, as we were saying, Oracle sales and LMS, they coordinate, how they do these audits to basically, in that case, get companies to buy Oracle Cloud, even if they weren't, wanting to use it. But there's an entire playbook. It's a big organization. You don't want to go it alone, is what I would say is the key point.
Well, Pam, I want to talk about Sunrise. We didn't talk about Oracle versus Google. We've got Oracle's litigation. They're suing, they were the federal government with the cloud, the $10 billion cloud contract. We got some other cases that we can't talk about right now, but maybe next year we'll come back and we'll take a victory lap on those. So everyone, thank you very much for your time. Pam, again, thanks for being a part of this conversation. All of Pam's contact information is up on the screen, as well as mine and Palisade and Tactical Law Group. If you guys have issues on the phone with legal, even if you're just worried, send us a, what do they call it, a LinkedIn message here. Send one to Pam or myself. We'll be happy to get back to you. Lots of material out on our website. I know, Pam, you've got a great blog on Oracle around their legal issues. We post a lot of material out there too. So take a look at that. And we will see you all in the new year.